Hello and welcome back to our cottage garden. This is our April tour. Might be that you're watching this in May because we're filming it quite late. We're in the last week of April now. We were a bit late filming this month because we actually went on holiday and it was incredible. It's delayed our work, but it was so needed. We haven't been on holiday for 8 years on a proper holiday, so it was amazing. But now we're back in the garden and a lot has changed since we last showed you around. This time of year things are just growing so quickly and it feels like every day you can come out here and find something new. So it's very exciting. And also such a relief to be able to say that it isn't too rainy this month. In the last few videos that I've made, I think every single video I've been telling you it's been super rainy, nice and cloudy and about 14 degrees Celsius here at the moment. And some of you have asked what our hardiness zone is, and we're actually in about the equivalent of 9A here. So it doesn't get quite as cold in the winter as I know it does for some of you guys who are over in the States. And now that we're into spring, the ducks are laying every day, which is amazing. We're having omelettes and eggs on bagels for breakfast. I love this time of year. When you kind of start to get some produce from the garden, it feels very rewarding. Waylon, our duck that was poorly, has made a really good recovery. He seems absolutely fine, so we're really relieved. We put quite a lot of intensive work into rehabilitating him after he was attacked, so it's really good that he's on the mend now. I thought I would start by showing you what's in flower at the moment. So down here we have our clematis montana. I planted this one about 3 years ago and it's a really good size now. It's been flowering for about a week with these beautiful soft pink flowers. It's actually planted in quite shady conditions down here and it does really well. And I love the way it softens this stone wall and adds something beautiful to an area that would otherwise not have any plants. It's quite an aggressive grower, so I do prune it a few times a year. If I didn't do that, it would completely swamp this wall, so it's good to keep it in check. And then also behind me, you can see that our forget-me-nots have started flowering, and these are amazing. They just self-seed all over the garden with not much help from me at all. Occasionally I'll shake the dried seed heads on bare patches of soil after they've gone over, but for the most part, they move themselves around really successfully. And they flower for quite a long time and they are lovely. You'll see more of those as we move up the garden too. And our rosemary's looking beautiful. It's got some pale blue flowers on at the moment as well. And the erigeron on the steps is just starting to come back to life. I think it looks best in a couple of months' time in summer when it really swamps these steps. There's a few early flowers on there at the moment as well. The most exciting thing down here though is our wisteria behind me, which I planted 5 years ago, and I was actually planning to do a troubleshooting video with you guys to see if anyone could help me figure out why it hasn't flowered, but it is going to flower this year, which is amazing. Every spring I come out here and check and I haven't had any luck so far, but we've got maybe about 15 buds on there now that are looking nice and big, so in the next couple of weeks I expect to see that one flowering as well. It's a white floribunda wisteria, so it should have really long spires of flowers. The idea of me planting it here was that it will look like a nice kind of waterfall as it falls down this stone wall behind me. Again, semi-shade, so not ideal for wisteria, it likes a bit of sun. But thankfully it is enough sunlight that it will produce some flowers for us. So I will show you that very soon when it flowers. Now let's go up the garden and I will show you some other things that are in flower. This area of the garden is looking really lovely at the moment. We have our weigela shrub in full bloom, and I'm not sure you can hear it on the video, but I can hear a constant hum from all the bees that are on there. They really love it, and who can blame them? It's a wonderful plant. I don't know what the variety is because it was here when we moved in, but one of these things we're really grateful to whoever planted it before us. It's also a really good time of year for fresh new leaves on trees, and we've got this smoke bush above me, has these gorgeous tiny kind of limey leaves at the moment, and similarly behind me you might be able to see the oak tree and the acer tree, which have got this lush new limey green growth on them. I think it's a really beautiful time of year for the trees, and it kind of looks almost a little bit autumnal where they're kind of warmer colours as well. You can see next to me we've got bits of cow parsley popping up now. I do let this self-seed around the garden a little bit. In some areas I treat it as though it's a weed and I dig it out. It's kind of a hybrid approach for me. And we've also got the daffodils just below me that are just going over now. So these ones down here are Pueblo, which are the same variety I have grown in the mini meadow. If you watched our last video, you would have seen those. And we've also got a new variety to me that are called White Marvel, and that's a double petaled variety. They are quite heavy flowers, so they tend to droop over, which I'm sort of less keen on, I think. I like to be able to see them while I'm walking around the garden, but they're beautiful nonetheless. I think that might be my first experience growing a double petaled daffodil, but I'm keen on trying more of this. I think they're a really amazing plant. But now I'm going to show you something that's a new project in the garden. We have recently started planting a yew hedge along these lower bits of the garden, and it's not going to be done all at once because hedging is quite expensive and quite labour intensive as well, cleaning out the area that we're going to be planting in. So we've done about 10 metres so far, and we've got 14 yew hedges in. I think they're about 4 or 5 foot tall, so they're quite a decent size, but it will take them a few years to fully pad out and look like a nice hedge. But we were just desperate for some more privacy in these lower parts of the garden, and this area was a mess. It was really, really full of self-sown trees and just shrubs that had got out of control. So it was time that we kind of added a little bit more form here, a little bit more privacy. And the amazing thing about yew is it's evergreen. I think it's a really nice colour for kind of fading into the background in the summer months, being a darker green. In winter though, these hedges will give us a bit more form as the plants around it die back for the season. So they will give us a lot of value in the garden, and they're plants that can potentially live for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So they hopefully will stay here well beyond the extent of our lifetimes. They're a really amazing plant and native to the area too, which is helpful for the local wildlife. But it has meant we've ended up with quite a lot of border space where we've done clearing to get these hedges in. So I think a trip to the garden centre might be in order. And this is quite a sunny border now. I used to treat this as semi-shade because the previous trees that we had in here created quite a big canopy and not a lot of light reached the soil. But you can see now there's a really decent amount of sun exposure on there. So it's kind of changed what we can plant. So I've popped a few roses in. We've still got the Japanese anemones and the hellebores and the Alchemilla mollis that we added last year. I also picked up some asters from Marjorie Fisher's garden, which I went to visit last month, and there's a really nice little nursery attached to it. So those should give us some lovely purple flowers when autumn comes around, hopefully. Just really excited to get this bit looking more organised and planned. And then eventually I will also try and get some yew hedges on the side opposite, but it's just going to take me a little while to get round to it. It's a long-term plan and good to make a start on it. This year we have really been struggling again with the box moth caterpillars, I think even worse than last year. So I have been using a biological control. I've been spraying them every fortnight, but it hasn't quite been enough, and I've seen so many of the caterpillars, and it seems like they kind of pick one hedge, really target it. The one hedge will become defoliated really quickly. So we've had one casualty closer to the house that I think I might pull out. Doesn't look like it's going to recover very nicely. And then the larger ones, I'm still really keen to protect those if I can. We'll just have to see, but it's partly another kind of push towards getting other hedges in the ground. So when we do eventually lose these hedges, which I think is inevitable now, we've got something else to fall back on and look after. But next, let's go up the garden and have a look at the mini meadow. You can see the mini meadow behind me has peaked and started to go over now. These daffodils have been absolutely amazing though. They gave us 4 weeks of really, really pristine flowers. So these are Pueblo, and I will soon be deadheading these so that they can divert their energy into the bulb and feed the bulb ahead of the flowers next year. But we've also got the snake's head fritillaries in here that have gone to seed, and I will be leaving these seed heads in the hope that they spread and continue to multiply over the years to come. You can see as well we've got the wild primroses in here that I'm really, really keen to preserve. And I love leaving parts of the grass unmown this time of year, especially with these little daisies that you get popping up around. I think they're so pretty and good for the insects too. So the next stage for the mini meadow is to just leave it untouched for a month or two, let it grow really long. You can see we've got some cow parsley popping up here, and we've got the bluebells that are continuing to spread and they're still flowering. So we're going to leave it alone. I'll deadhead the daffodils just to tidy it up a bit. but it will get quite long and billowy and luscious over the next few weeks. I think something I've learned from doing the mini meadow with all of these daffodils and snake's head fritillaries is the value of other spring flowering bulbs. And previously I focused a lot of my efforts on tulips, and I think I've noticed that they are just a little bit too unreliable, and then the flowers don't last that long. If you get a windy day or a really sunny day, they can fall apart quite quickly. So I would really like to focus my energy in the next few years on daffodils, experiment with growing some new varieties, maybe naturalise some more in different areas of the garden. But I've just been absolutely so impressed by these. I'm really, really pleased, and I can't wait to see it again next year. And next I'm going to quickly show you our tulips. So a few tulips left in flower to share with you. These are Black Hero, and then we had some other varieties in here that have been and gone, and we mostly missed them while we were away on holiday. These are really, really beautiful, but they don't look like the healthiest of flowers. They have a few blemishes on, and some of them look a little bit rotten as well. I think it might be a sign that I need to rest this bed and not do tulips in here next year, which I will find quite tricky because I do love growing tulips, especially these double petaled, like kind of ruffled varieties. So I'm unsure what to do with this bed now. I might potentially remove it and just turn it into lawn. Not sure. Alternative being I rest it and plant something else here instead for a year or two. But these are, even though they don't look great, they're so beautiful, and the petals kind of have these scalloped edges, and they're really lovely colour as well. The other thing we're kind of considering in this area is whether it's too shaded to really use it, because we've got these new hazel hurdles up against the direction of the sun, so there's quite a lot of shadow in here now. Now that we're almost finished with our spring flowers though, we can move up the garden and have a look at our efforts at growing food this year. So here we are in the greenhouse where I'm getting most of my seeds started, and you can see here I've potted on my tomatoes. It's really warm in here, it's about 26 degrees Celsius. Outside it's about 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so it does get very warm, which is really great for getting a good start on these tomato plants. We've got about 6 different varieties of tomato. I have labelled some of them, but not in a very organised way, as I usually do. But I've got a couple of cherry tomatoes in here, I've got a couple of beefsteak tomatoes, and then some normal tomatoes as well. I will eventually be moving these into the polytunnel, but for now they're getting a head start in here. And then once they've started to send their roots out the bottom of these pots, that's probably when I'll start transplanting them into the ground. I've also started my other seeds in here, so I've got some melons, nasturtiums, cucumbers, and some courgettes and leeks too. I'm growing some edamame beans this year, which is new to me, but I've started them in the shed because if I grow any kind of beans or peas in here, the mice will just eat them straight away, and there's absolutely no point in trying. Whereas in the shed, I think they haven't quite learnt that they're in there, so fingers crossed they don't get eaten. I'll also be starting my French beans in the next couple of weeks as well. In the raised bed here, we've got some elephant garlic, which I'm going to be harvesting probably in a month's time. It's looking nice and tall. But now I can show you the polytunnel where I am going to be planting the tomatoes once they're ready. So the polytunnel is looking a bit like a food forest at the moment, which is my style of growing. I'm not really a neat lines kind of person. I like to keep things in a happy muddle in sort of a polyculture. And it's coming to the end of our winter crop cycle now. So all of the things that we've had in the ground, like the chard and the kale, are all going to flower and getting ready to set seed for the next generation of plants. We can still harvest from them though, the leaves are still good. We've got loads of different things in here at the moment. We've got some leeks, chard, some kale, some purple sprouting broccoli, some dill, parsley, broad beans, and I think that's it for the way of annuals. But aside from the kind of annual veg that I grow in here, I've got a backbone of perennials and permanent plants. So I have a grapevine that I'm going to be training onto this trellis, and it's just started making its way towards it now. And I bought this as a cutting in 2020 when all of the garden centres were closed, and basically the only way to buy plants for a time was to buy cuttings from people. So it's taken me a while to get it established, but it looks like it will I don't know if it will fruit this year, but it's going to get some good coverage on the trellis at least. Then behind me we've got a dwarf cherry tree, which I think I'm going to have to net so that the birds don't eat the fruit this year. But that's just finished flowering and started to produce tiny cherries for us. I leave the doors open and I let creatures come in and out, and I see all sorts of predators in here, from blackbirds to toads and wasps. And partly the reason for leaving the kale to go to flower is that it will attract predatory wasps that will feast on the caterpillars that would try to eat next year's kale. So leaving things to go to seed is beneficial for bringing in natural pest control, and definitely something I would encourage you to do if you haven't tried it before. It's beautiful even if it doesn't help with anything else. But the idea is those perennial plants and permanent plants will form a kind of backbone that maintains the soil structure while the annuals come and go around them. And I've got a little bit more to show you in the vegetable garden too. The vegetable garden is looking quite wild and untidied at the moment. I focus most of my efforts closer to the house, and sometimes I just run out of time. So I think it would potentially benefit from me spending a good afternoon here tidying things up a bit. But we're in asparagus season now, which is really, really lovely. So we've got 2 beds of asparagus. We've got an early variety and a later variety, and we're kind of at the point now where they're both cropping. We love asparagus, and this time of year we love to make a risotto with it. It's really tasty. You can also see around me we've got the perennial onions, which are getting ready to produce bulbils on the top. We've got perennial kale, and then we've got loads of wilderness up here too. So the forget-me-nots have self-sown. They're beautiful natural ground cover. I think you can eat them. I think people do use them to decorate cakes and things. Not something I've ever done, I just think they're really lovely. And then we've got some chives in here too, which are just getting ready to flower, and they are a beautiful flower when they come out in May. And then we've got some rhubarb and some elephant garlic. So the elephant garlic is the only thing in here that isn't perennial. I just needed a bit of extra space. You can also see in the orchard behind me we have a little bit of blossom left on our apple trees. The cow parsley is starting to grow, so in May it will become a really, really lush, billowy just field of cow parsley. Really, really lovely. And at the moment there are some bluebells that I added. I think I added them about 5 years ago, flowering underneath the apple trees too. But bluebells seem to do really well here, and they do spread, so that's something that should also get better in the coming years. And then last but not least, we have some new plants to the garden that I'm really excited to share with you. So down here we've got about 15 new plants that were given to me by a relative. Most of them are hostas, and they're all a really good size, and I think some of them will be able to be divided into a few smaller plants as well. But I haven't really got a lot of experience growing hostas. I've got a couple of them dotted around, but not much in the way of variety at all. So this is really exciting for me. And I think my plan with these is that I'm going to plant them around the pond. It's currently not an area that I've gardened at all, and it's quite wild. So it'd be really good to get some nice plants around there. And I think because they're happy in part shade, they'll be well suited to that spot as well. We've also got some acer trees, we've got some hellebores, a couple of ferns, some lily of the valley, and a couple of yew trees and an ivy as well. So there's loads here that I can use to plant up the pond. And although I'm not going to have time to do it today, I will show it to you in a future video, and I can't wait to get started. But thank you so much for watching today, and if you'd like to see how the garden develops over the months and years, be sure to subscribe, and we will see you next time.